If there's one thing that I'd love to share with you this morning and get across on this show over this 4-hour stretch here from 6 to 10 on 95.7 FM, it's this. Everything you have been told about police officers shooting unarmed Americans and who's actually at risk in America today is a lie. Everything is a lie. You know, there's been obviously this national story this week around the loss of 31-year-old Jonathan Diller, a New York City cop who was killed by a career criminal at a traffic stop, a guy who had a rap sheet of 9 felonies and 21 arrests between the alleged shooter and the person who was in the car with him who shot Jonathan Diller. They had a combined nearly 40 arrests. 40, not 14, 40 arrests between the two of them. And as Jonathan Diller loses his life, he becomes now this year the 9th police officer killed by gunfire. He becomes the 27th officer who lost his life in the line of duty just this year as we get set to wrap up the month of March. We are a quarter of the way through the year. And these are individuals, you know, all over the country. We know here in Missouri, we've lost one with Officer Allen in Independence. But this is Missouri. This is down to Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, New York, New Mexico, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, Wyoming. All those states have lost men. All 27 victims lost in the line of duty this year are men. The average age, 40 years old. So that number right there, just think about it. 9 cops killed by gunfire, 27 lives lost in the line of duty. Compare that to the narrative you've been told and you've been sold and you've been lied to about over the last 4 years or so. And you were sold a bill of lies that if you're unarmed, and especially if you're an unarmed person of color in this country, well, you should fear the police because you might be next. You could be the next Michael Brown. You might be the next George Floyd. Yeah, that's what you were told. And you were lied to. And the data this year, thus far, is overwhelming and suggests just how badly you are getting lied to if you believe that narrative. So far this year, this is from the Washington Post Police Shootings Database, and I'll put this up on my Twitter page at Pete Mundo. I guess it's now X. I'll put it up on Facebook as well so you can see it for yourself, and you can cross-check this. You don't have to take my word for it. I'll put it all up there for you to look at. That way you don't have to just take my word for it if you don't want to. If you do, great. If not, okay. I'll give you the data. Thus far this year, there have been 2 unarmed people shot and killed by police. One in Florida, Rashad Graham, and one in South Carolina, Victor Roblero. Two people unarmed, shot and killed by cops this year in America. Compare that to 27 cops who have lost their lives in the line of duty. 9 of them by gunfire. You have over 13 times as many cops who have lost their lives this year in the line of duty than you do unarmed Americans shot and killed by police. You think that headline's ever going to scream across some of your favorite cable news channels? How about, your dopey NPR National Panhandler radio affiliate? You think they're going to talk about that? Right? You think the boring-ass news wheel in town is going to have this conversation? Nah. They don't want to. See, facts are inconvenient for them. They don't want to talk about Jonathan Diller, 31-year-old officer who leaves behind a wife and a 1-year-old son. He doesn't fit their narrative. Not only does he not fit the narrative, he bucks the narrative, the bill of goods that has been sold by so many over the last 4 years. That if you just treated criminals as people who needed help and a little slap on the wrist and a little tisk, now, we would create this utopia where there would be no need for prisons. People could live in peace. They would learn their lessons. And life would go on. And all the money we saved on the criminal justice system, we would no longer have to do anymore. If we just invested in things like mental health, we would be A-OK in this grandiose utopia that America's always been deserving of. It's a lie. It's BS. It's a scam. It's whatever you want to call it. It's not true. It never has been true. And the data backs that up. Now, yesterday, speaking of Officer Diller, the White House did put out a statement on this. Now, yesterday, Joe Biden was in New York, where Officer Diller lost his life earlier in the week. And he was doing a fundraiser with Barack Obama, Bill Clinton. Meantime, you had Queen Latifah and Lizzo performing. So it must have been a hell of a buffet they had there for those two to show up. Meantime, Donald Trump showed up in New York as well and was at the wake of Officer Diller. You want to talk about the optics of that? Donald Trump at the wake of Officer Diller while Joe Biden is hanging out with Stephen Colbert and Lizzo at a fundraiser to raise $25 million? That's unbelievable. That is a stark contrast right there. Regardless of how you feel about both men, that is a stark contrast. So the White House didn't really say much. They don't want to talk about this, of course, just like they don't want to talk about Laken Riley. So here was yesterday Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, talking about Officer Diller. But it's very important to note what she did not say. Here it is.
Relates to the death of the officer. Look, our hearts go out to this officer who tragically lost his life in the line of duty. We're also praying for his family during this difficult time, who now has an empty seat at their dinner table.
Notice what she's not saying. She's not saying the name Jonathan Diller. Just like they wouldn't say the name Laken Riley. They don't want to humanize these people. They realize they have to acknowledge it to some degree, but they don't want to bring up their names. They won't say their names. They want to act like, it's really too bad that thing happened to that person and, we're thinking about them and their family. It really is a tragedy, boy. But they don't want you to remember their name. They don't want you to remember the story. But they know they have to say something. That's why they break this down, and you only hear the White House press secretary say the officer. As if, just that officer person. There's a reason for that. It's not that she forgot, although that wouldn't surprise me either, but that's not really the reason for it.
President Biden is deeply grateful for the sacrifices police officers make to keep our communities safe. This shooting is yet another painful reminder of the toll of gun violence, that what it's doing to inflict on families and our communities and our nation. And that's why the president signed more than 24 executive actions. That's why we're able to pass a bipartisan agreement to deal with the gun violence that we're seeing in this country. Obviously, more work needs to be done. We need Congress to continue to act on making sure that our communities are safe. Again, our hearts go out to this officer and his family. It's a difficult time for them.
Wow. That's Karine Jean-Pierre right there. Now, I'm seeing this on the text line at 913-408-7957. Gee, Pete, it's almost as if there are too many guns on the streets. Well, that's what Karine Jean-Pierre just said. So what do you say about a guy who had a gun, who shot a police officer, who was convicted in 9 felony cases and arrested 21 times? You're talking about a career criminal who had no business being part of a civilized society. Yet in places like New York, and unfortunately to a lesser extent here in Jackson County, this is what you get. You get criminals who are on the streets after too short a period of time and are there to terrorize innocent people. And I think the tide's starting to turn, but it's not turning, I admit, fast enough. Coming up, the most powerful story in the wake of this, a letter that was written by somebody who lost a loved one, lost a father as a child in the line of duty. I want to share this letter with you if you can make it through it. God bless you. I'm not sure I will. We'll share it next on KCMO 95.7 FM and the KCMO Talk Radio app. This letter, of all places, was written on Barstool yesterday. And give Dave Portnoy, the founder and owner of Barstool Sports, credit. He doesn't get enough credit for doing a lot of good work. And he raised, I think it was $1 million this week at Barstool for the family of Jonathan Diller in conjunction with Tunnel to Towers, the organization that helps veteran and first responder families that was created out of the September 11th attacks. So that happened this week. And then I just stumbled upon this on Barstool Sports' website, and it's written by a guy named Kevin Raftery. And Kevin Raftery is a guy who, as a young boy, lost his father, who was a New York City cop. And this is relatable, I think, for anybody who is in law enforcement. But frankly, I just think it's a great story that even for those of us who are not in law enforcement and who don't have families in law enforcement, it makes us appreciate what these families go through when these men and women offer to serve their communities, knowing full well there is a chance that the job might take them forever from their families. So this was on Barstool Sports. I'll put this up on our social media pages later as well. But here's how it starts. I, like Jonathan Diller's baby boy, the New York City cop who lost his life this week, am the son of a slain member of the NYPD. My father, Patrick Rafferty, was a homicide detective in the 67th Precinct in East Flatbush in Brooklyn. On September 10th, 2004, he and his partner, Bobby Parker, were murdered in a shooting that eerily mirrors the death of Jonathan Diller this week. They were responding to a call Bobby got directly from a woman in the neighborhood. She told Bobby and my father that her son was attempting to steal her car. Carjacking was just another line on this prick's very long rap sheet that included sexual assault convictions, among others. My dad and Bobby arrived on the scene to find the man, in fact, was trying to boost his own mother's car. After boxing in the vehicle, they attempted to detain him, when he somehow managed to wrestle away Bobby's Glock 19 and fire 4 shots into both Parker and my father. From what I've been told, one bullet managed to sever the main artery in my dad's thigh, and he bled out and passed fairly quickly, but not before managing to fire back at the coward, hitting him twice in the leg and the ankle. Although it's morbid, the fact that my father was able to return fire before dying weirdly gives me some peace. He loved John Wayne, and the idea of him going out like a cowboy is very fitting for a man who used to wear a Stetson into the precinct and try to convince all the black guys in the squad to sing Johnny Cash with him. Bobby Parker was a much bigger man than my father, standing at 6'4", close to 300 pounds. He was a gentle giant who had a brief career as a professional wrestler. Bobby hung on a few minutes longer than my dad, and he was able to call dispatch and let the guys know what happened, who shot them, and even told them where they could find a picture of the perp in his car. The scumbag was ultimately found lying bleeding in a fire escape and is now serving 2 life sentences. He will die without ever walking another day as a free man, and that's what he deserves. I've never told this story in its entirety publicly. My generation likes to blast out any misfortune they receive to the masses for clout, and I don't like that. But I do think I have a responsibility to utilize whatever platform I have for good. And Officer Diller's death is a situation I am unfortunately familiar with. Stephanie Diller's life has been upended. It's never going to be the same. She will again never get to kiss her husband when he walks in the door after a double shift. And her son will never know firsthand how great a man his father is. I spoke briefly, he writes, on a show today about how I feel like I crowdsource my memories of my father from actual moments I can remember and stories I'm told by family and friends. It's an effed up mental shrine of a superhero-like figure with reality and fiction interweaving endlessly. Unfortunately, it's all I have. Even worse, Diller's son's memories of his father will likely be all provided to him by other people. Goes on the right here, growing up without a father is strange. My mother, who is an absolute saint and the strongest person I've ever known, did an amazing job with my sisters and I. But I was very angry and a misguided kid at times. How can you learn how to be a man without having a man there to teach you? It's a question I've tortured myself with every day since I was a little boy. Although I had something very tragic happen to me as a child, and it still affects me to this day, my life as a whole has not been tragic. I think it's important to say and not get lost in the self-pity. Thankfully, I had the support and an infrastructure put in place by the NYPD to help guide my way. Donated funds, much like the ones we're securing for the Diller family, allowed my mother the financial security to pay off her mortgage, to be a full-time mom, with the help of a wooden spoon here and there, and send my sisters and I to college debt-free. Without this, my path would have been much different, and I doubt I'd be working here or writing this for Barstool. This was hard to write, but I hope that sharing my story will shed light on just how powerful it is when people rally behind a good cause. Jonathan Diller made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the safety of a city full of strangers. He walked a noble line that is too often disrespected, and his family deserves to be taken care of in his honor. That was written on Barstool Sports by Kevin Rafferty, who lost his father, Patrick, back in 2004. How you can't listen to that and hopefully realize what the men and women here in Kansas City and around the entire region think about, have to think about, and some ultimately end up dealing with on a far too often basis. How you could buy into the narrative that the men and women who choose to do this aren't doing it for the purest of reasons and aren't waking up every day and sacrificing in ways that most of us can't even fathom. I don't know how you can't come to that conclusion. And whether it's Officer Allen in Independence a couple of weeks ago or Officer Diller this week in New York City, they are the ones who ultimately are sacrificing it all, and they're doing it for the rest of us.